Thank you, Sonia, and thank you guys for having me here today. And a special thanks to Sophia Vickland for just inviting me to speak. It's really an honor to do so, and that the talk title really amplifies what I'll be talking about. It's probably a little simpler than that, applying my experience as a millennial entrepreneur, really becoming part of a global startup movement that I see is something much bigger than we might be able to see from the LA startup ecosystem. So just really fast, I'm going to introduce what I'm working on right now and then kind of dive into the talk for you guys. So I'm running business development and strategy at a startup called Vitamin, which basically does artificial intelligence for social media marketing. So we provide a hands-free growth strategy that basically operates your social channels, generating leads, growing your following, increasing engagement, and conversion. So that's my current project. We're based here in Venice, or a little farther away, but in Venice. And I'm also actually going to introduce my mom, Michele Ohayon, who will come up a little bit later. She's sitting over there. And we are actually co-creating a docu-series that's following the journey of several female tech founders in the LA area. So we'll touch on that a bit later, and she'll give her perspective as a documentary filmmaker who's been in the industry for 30 years and has really made an impact in that way, kind of blending the tech world with the media world to showcase what it is to be a female millennial entrepreneur. So now I'm going to dive into my own personal experience. I really want to shed light on this interconnected web of entrepreneurs in their late teens and early 20s who are truly trying to make an impact on the world rather than pursuing a traditional career path. So myself, I was actually started my college education at Wesleyan University. I was studying clinical psychology, and about halfway through my college experience, I felt as though I wasn't fully addressing my potential as a student, as a creator, as a creative person with that career path. And from there, I started to discover, the topic of entrepreneurship and these young entrepreneurs who were building businesses in their late teens that were actually literally making a huge impact on the world, side by side with Fortune 500s. And so I kind of stopped my college career about halfway. I decided to transfer to Pomona College, which is very close to here. And at that point, I decided to jump into this world of entrepreneurship, and I was introduced to an organization called the Chiro Society. The Chiro Society is an international organization of college-age entrepreneurs who are building high-impact businesses. So all of a sudden, I'm this 19-year-old who ends up on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, mingling with kids in their 18, 19 years old, building these businesses, anything from a wearable device that filters the air around your face for disease prevention or to lower the pollutants in the air that you're inhaling, to a Dutch company that's bringing thermal power from the ocean. So starting to become part of this network of young entrepreneurs across the globe, not just here in the US, but truly across the globe, building these incredible businesses. And from there, I really caught the bug, and I got a sense of what's happening, with this global startup nation. Why are we seeing these startups pop up, in all these different startup ecosystems, and how are they becoming this topic that's, at the forefront of the media next to some of these Fortune 500s, etc. So, as I became a part of this, I ended up launching a branch of this organization in Italy. I then met up with a classmate who had just graduated we went to Budapest to actually, because through this, through our own contacts and these entrepreneurs we had met through the Chiro Society, we came across some interesting problems that were, that many people didn't know about, that were happening in Central Eastern Europe for young entrepreneurs. So now I'm going to kind of dive into what I found in Budapest, one startup ecosystem out of many that are present around the world, and how we can apply that to creating a successful and collaborative startup ecosystem in LA or anywhere else around the world. So the case in Budapest was there's a large amount of technical talent, extremely high caliber technical talent, and strong innovative tendencies utilizing this technical talent. Additionally, there are hundreds of millions of dollars set aside by the European Union to invest in this young technical talent or these young entrepreneurs. That said, there was a clear problem in the ecosystem that was stifling a lot of this talent and preventing a lot of these startups that were trying to make it from making it specifically in this location. And that was partly visible because there were 3 specific companies that had come out of Budapest and became huge success stories, especially considering the size of that small city. Those companies came to the Valley and actually made a huge impact. So those companies are Prezi, I don't know if you guys have heard of it, presentation software, LogMeIn, and Ustream, all huge, huge companies that happened to come from this tiny place, Budapest. And they were only able to make it when they left that environment. So we really wanted to dive in and see what was going on there and see if we could create a program that would help move this forward using the resources that did exist and figuring out what was really preventing a lot of these startups from making it in that specific place. So what we found was very, very interesting. First of all, despite the fact that there was a plethora of capital set aside by the EU to invest in innovation in the region, this was not being utilized in the correct way. This money was getting into the hands of not necessarily the right people who would be able to help these young entrepreneurs grow their businesses. And in many ways, this money was actually dealt with in a very corrupt manner. And there were specific cases of entrepreneurs who had lost 70% of their company in their first round of investment and had lost control over their company. And furthermore, their investors didn't necessarily have the network or the experience to help them reach an exit point or help them really build up their company in the right way. So that was one thing that was very interesting that we found. Another thing was the kind of toxic, informal networks that existed in that specific ecosystem. So even if there's capital and there's talent and there's universities fueling entrepreneurship and there's policies trying to push that forward, the ecosystem and the way that young entrepreneurs were interacting with each other as well as mentors and investors was not in a collaborative, pay it forward way. And because there wasn't that sort of grassroots desire to help each other and to join forces and to build companies together, rather there was this distrust and this lack of mentorship from some of the older people in the community or more experienced people in the community. And there was a lack of angel capital to invest in these younger ideas. And furthermore, the accelerator programs and the incubator programs were not being operated in a beneficial way. So I think something that we're really lucky to have here in LA or in the Bay Area is this collaborative environment and this also this, we all have a fear of failure, but a greater desire to really take a leap and test out these ideas because our community validates that and encourages that and will help us as we do that. So that did not exist in Budapest. I'm gonna reference here. So in addition to that, obviously if you look at the history of that region and at Budapest specifically, that country, Hungary only transformed into a capitalist economy in 1989. So you have this different mentality and different culture that's not necessarily encouraging entrepreneurship in the way that we have here in the US or even in other parts of the world. So that was a huge barrier. So anyways, this was a very interesting experience for me. This summer before my senior year, I ended up being in Budapest for about 5 months, creating the foundation of what is now a seed fund that my partner is still there operating, that's sourcing companies across Central Eastern Europe, connecting them to the US market, as well as investors in the UK, and really trying to pull out some of the talent in the region and foster it in the right way. But I do believe there's a long way to go for an ecosystem like Budapest. And it's important to note, I bring that up because I think, as tech community here in LA, it's important for us to look at this global startup movement that's really reshaping our global economy as a global movement. It's not just happening here or in the Valley. It's happening everywhere. And there are specific hubs that are fostering these levels of entrepreneurship. There are also specific cities where there's a desire to build these companies, and there are young entrepreneurs who have these big visions who are not gaining access to a lot of the resources that they need. And that was something very interesting that I learned through that experience. And another thing that also is happening that I was able to see was this concept of what I call a digital nomad. So you have these entrepreneurs in their late teens, early 20s, traveling the world, collaborating with each other, and with this incredibly positive and almost overly optimistic mindset that they are actually going to change the world. And they're living their lives as if they're 30 or 40-year-old businesswomen or businessmen doing all of these things, but they're really only 19 or 20. So that actually raises the question of what is this going to do to our young millennial generation as they get older? Where is that going to stir the world? Imagine if some of the leaders of technology today, of Steve Jobs, Richard Branson, some of these other big names, had met when they were in their late teens or early 20s. What would happen? And there are several interconnected webs of these young entrepreneurs that will be those people that are now collaborating 20 years before. And that's what I saw, and that's what I kind of wanted to try and paint a picture of for you guys today. And now kind of moving more into the gender and demographic topic amongst millennial entrepreneurs, considering the docuseries, I think two concerns that come up with this startup movement are one, the gender and racial underrepresentation in the field, and also the psychological impact that this has on young people involved in this world. I have friends who are 20 years old who've been working on their business for 4 years who are struggling because they're put in a place of pressure as if they had 15 years of experience under their belt. And this is something that we, as a community here in LA, for example, have to keep an eye on and make sure we look out for some of these younger entrepreneurs who are doing all of this, especially because it really is a grassroots movement and there's not really a formal structure that's supporting this or looking out for these young people. So that's something very important to keep in mind and to look out for as our startup nation sort of matures. And another thing is the gender disparity as well as the racial disparity, but here I'm bringing to light the gender disparity and it kind of, really trying to understand why there are so few women in the tech space. Right now, only 3% of funded tech companies in Silicon Valley are founded by women. 13% of VC, I believe it's 13% of VC deals have women founders. At the same time, female-led startups overall have a 35% higher return on investment. And these are statistics I'm pulling from a lot of different articles that have been circulating now. But the real question is, if women make great entrepreneurs, why are there so few? And I have a few theories on this, especially being involved in a few networks that are kind of looking at women in tech, and also now looking at kind of creating this docu-series and following the journey of many of these women. It's important to really look closer at this and not just make this a topic of discussion where we have several women in tech networks talking about these numbers being low, but really bringing in more men and women into this conversation to make sure that we are representing a large array of people in our startup ecosystem as this becomes such a dominant part of our economy. So now I'm going to call up my mother, Michele Ohayon, to just kind of give her perspective and an overview of what we're doing with the docu-series, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. Thank you so much.
That's a tough act to follow. I'll do my best.
It's my first time really speaking with this many people.
Well, I learned a lot. I identify very much with Dani's world because as filmmakers, we're also entrepreneurial. I didn't start out to be like that way, We were just doing one thing, one time, one film at a time. And then as the industry evolved and the entrepreneurial world started to overlap with ours, we decided we're going to be branching out to the startup world, to the tech world, and utilize that and join forces because we are tech people. We use, the first HD cams that come out. We use HD cards. We are all the time in the technology world. So, but it hasn't been appreciated. We're known as content providers, not as tech people, but we are tech people. And so, as Dani was telling me about her world and this amazing young people that surround her, I was touched and inspired because I thought that the new generation is, not very active, that they are kind of apathetic, they don't care about what's going on in the world. I was marching in the streets and I thought, okay, this is hopeless. But I realized that there is hope and they are doing their own little revolution in their own way. And that way is really, the word disrupting is not just a cliche, but it is real. I mean, they are disrupting the big corporations. They are taking things into their own hands and giving alternatives to institutions and norms and rules that have been here forever. Whether it's Uber or Airbnb, think about it. They are disrupting something that has been existing for a long time. So that was very appealing to me, and I started researching and talking to many of her friends. And at first I thought, oh, these kids just want to make money fast. It's boring. It's not a good subject for a movie. But then I realized that other than making money, they have amazing ideas and they really truly want to change the world in their own little way or big way and give back to the community. And that made them already interesting characters to follow and to portray. When I started pitching it to networks and cable and agents, it was first a co-ed kind of project. So it was a lot of the 19-year-old kids from across the board. And then they said, no, we're not interested in guys. We want to be in the female space. I'm like, this is the first time in my life I've been pitching a project and they told me, kick the guys out, we just want the women. So I'm like, okay, I'm in. So then we started filming, and I just have women from all walks of life. And the intention is to inspire not only women, but young people to start and continue and dream of their own ideas. And like Dani told me the first day, and I asked her, what is an entrepreneur? What makes them different from just somebody who has an idea? And she said, it's not just about having an idea, it's about executing. And this is what we're all trying to do. And so what we're showing is young people who are not only having an idea or maybe have rich parents, but really want to execute and change the world. So that's how we collaborate now, and it's really a lot of fun to see her at work.
Thank you so much for a wonderful topic. So we're going to open it up for Q&A. If you could please stand up, state your name, your company. Let's leave it to just questions, and if you have any feedback, you can meet with Dani and Michele afterwards. I'm going to hand the mic to John.
Hello, my name is Mati. I help run a number of local conferences, and we don't have age limits on our conference on purpose because of what you brought up. I've noticed at other conferences that they have age limits like 18 or 21. Have you found this to be an inhibitor to what you guys are doing?
With age limits, are you referring to presenters' age limits or?
Participants in general, but it seems to be across the board according to some of the terms on some of the conferences, the larger $2,000 to $3,000 tech conferences that I've seen.
I've actually not experienced that before. I believe that, there, because of the kind of trendiness that's coming with this startup, having your own startup now, especially amongst young people, perhaps they might be trying to filter some of the young people who have ideas and maybe are not really working on their, really building a business yet. I imagine that could be, one reason, because it's actually becoming almost a mainstream trendy thing, especially amongst college students, to try and launch their own startup. But the majority are actually not serious about doing this. They're doing it as experimentation or for other reasons. Whereas there's a small pool of people who are actually at that age really building something.
So it seems to largely be based on alcohol laws and the fact that if you're an adult or not. And so that's at least from what I've seen. So.
Dani, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for a really great presentation. I'm Victor. I'm a local attorney here. You mentioned corruption as being sort of an institutional barrier to allowing these entrepreneurs to really grow, and barriers from allowing these networks to sort of, coalesce. How do you propose, from a global level and then a local level, reducing the level of corruption and helping to just foster these networks?
That's a really good question. It's a tough one. Well, I feel like those levels, in my experience, those levels of corruption are present in very specific locations. I have not personally experienced that here in LA or heard about that in the Valley as much. I'm sure it exists. However, in Budapest, for example, or in Central Eastern Europe, that's something that really infiltrates all levels of society in a way. There's a general distrust of the government. When I started the branch of Chiro in Italy, it was even worse. There's a general mistrust of the government. People don't pay their taxes. People don't trust people up there, and that is with a reason. I mean, the people in many ways running those countries are corrupt in a lot of ways, and we see that here, of course, as well. But that happens to infiltrate the startup environment because the government is still heavily involved. And in terms of the European Union capital, because of certain access that some government officials have, or former bankers, or whoever is there, they are able to shortcut to receive this capital and not have the best interest of the entrepreneurs in mind. And so it ends up infiltrating the startup ecosystem because the startup ecosystem is young and still heavily involved with the EU and local governmental level, whereas I feel like here in LA or the Valley, in a lot of ways, it is a grassroots movement. Yes, the government is involved, but a lot of the capital is private and coming from individuals themselves. Here we're dealing with governmental or EU money, so it's different.
Hi, I'm Christy, and I've been telling everybody I'm here doing web development, but actually after this I want to do a docu-series on geezer startups.
Right.
Thank you. Maybe next. So we have put, my 5 children through college. Made me wonder what the conversation was like after 2 years of life at Wesleyan, or in your mother's case, 2 years of paying for your life at Wesleyan, to say, I don't think I want to do it that way, and I want to go someplace else, I want to do something else. And curiously enough, you didn't tell us what you changed your major to, and also, we did a word count, probably 99% of your words were about 5 months spent someplace else doing something else besides what you were doing in what is really expensive higher education, where we think we're preparing you to have a life and a career. So I would wonder what your thought is on higher education and what we ought to be doing either differently with that or instead of that.
Definitely. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think there's so many views on that matter. Personally, I had to reach a point and encounter certain people and certain groups of people that actually gave me the opportunity to realize that, wow, like there's all this other stuff going on outside of my college campus. So I really didn't end up having the traditional college experience because I was off running around, doing all these crazy things. But there's a question mark there, because it's like, do we want to implement heavily entrepreneurial programs in our higher education as part of that program, or does being an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur, mean actually not going that way and finding that path on your own? Because the second you implement an entrepreneurship education program, isn't that defeating the point of entrepreneurship? So for me, it was like, well, it was me who had to figure out and find this other path, and that is why it was meant for me. I do think it's important that, you know, schools, especially for Pomona, is a very traditional liberal arts school, although it's right next to Claremont McKenna, which just screams startup life everywhere. But Pomona itself, as an administration, was actually resisting a lot of what I was doing and what some of the young startuppers on campus were doing. So I do think it's good to put some of that and educate students on technology, obviously technology, startups, entrepreneurship, but not to think that because we have more entrepreneurship programs, more good entrepreneurs are going to come out of that, because I think it really comes from, you know, a sense of being, because to be a successful entrepreneur, which I am not at all, I mean, I'm just beginning and I don't know if I would make it there, takes so much, and it's not something that is meant for everyone, as I'm sure many people here know.
Thank you so much for talking about this. I can relate on such a deep level because I am a really young entrepreneur and I have a startup of my own. And one thing, this is my business partner, one thing that we have really been coming up against a lot is how to thrive before a budget. And it's one thing to say, oh, you're young, you're growing, you're still like, you're just early, like be patient. But we're putting our everything on the line, and you know, does that mean like, okay, I must be committed 100% to my business, entrepreneur, and work a restaurant job to support myself, you know, because I'm young? Or how can we get these people who have the wealth to really recognize, yeah, they're young, but they're driven. Yeah, they're young, but we can help them have a viable plan. Where do you think the balance is in bridging these young startups with great ideas and great fire under their belts with people that can help support and provide guidance and make sure that, or not make sure, but at least give a way, a path forward to be successful?
I think that's a really good question. That's a very difficult one to answer. There's almost like a kind of gap, because, you know, an entrepreneur might have an idea and they have all the tendencies and the traits that would make them an amazing entrepreneur. However, there's that hump in the beginning between the idea and the MVP, which often takes a lot of money. You know, we end up scrapping or really living on nothing to make it to that point. I think that as you know, startups become, you know, such a crucial part of our economy, as they already are, more and more people want to invest in startups. They want to support young entrepreneurs. They're still jumping on board at a point where they see a certain level of traction, and so that makes it difficult to get to that point. But I do think that with time, there's going to be more money at an even earlier stage, investing maybe in people rather than a product, you know, because what it really comes down to is the person and the team that's going to make this a success story. The product or the company itself is going to pivot so many times, so it really depends on the team and who's building this. And I think, you know, if you look at incubator programs like Idea Lab, for example, which is right here, you know, looking at high potential individuals, pairing them with an idea at a very early stage and incubating them, that's one model that looks at that, but it is difficult. I do know that, you know, there are, in a lot of these women in tech focused networks, there are women who really want to support younger women or even young individuals to build their idea, and they don't really have a return in mind as much as they're passionate about, you know, giving an opportunity. So that might be, you know, that between that and grants, especially for young entrepreneurs, especially as a female yourself, there are a lot of those opportunities, but they are very difficult to find still. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and maybe a test to, you know, are you a strategic, are you a resourceful entrepreneur if you can make it to that point, bootstrapping in that way.
Hi, my name is Daniel. I'm a founder and CEO of a home healthcare company, and I guess I'm part of that new millennial movement. And I actually have found, you know, we're past that, you know, startup phase, and we are generating revenue. But the hard part for us, it seems, because we're a service company and not a tech company, it's harder for us to find, you know, investors and investments into the company, because everyone wants to invest in startup tech companies. So what advice do you have for for service companies and what we can do to actually have that scalable, investment.
Definitely. I think especially there's almost this sort of mold that in order for a VC to invest in you or most angels, you have to kind of fit that mold and reach a certain level of scalability. Whereas in the part agency model, you may be able to scale steadily, but not to a $1 billion business, but scale steadily and provide a solid return on an investment. So for that, I would really look at individuals who are not necessarily obsessed with this sort of startup model, or maybe not even totally ingrained in the startup world yet, but are interested in what you're doing and maybe have a history in what you're doing and just love the concept, and sort of provide an outline that shows steady but not exponential returns, but with a lower risk factor. And the company, the artificial intelligence for social media company that I'm actually helping build right now, we are kind of on that bridge of agency or SaaS. What we're really trying to do is scale growth engineering for startups, where we can charge $1,000 a month, and your social channels are growing, engaging, and generating leads. Now, how can you scale something like that? That's something we're running into, and I think it is important to not just look at that, specific milestones that venture capitalists look at in terms of a success rate for a startup, but look at other smaller companies that have potential to grow in a more steady way that's not necessarily going to be explosive growth or nothing. So I would look at wealthy individuals who are passionate about the industry.
Hi, my name's Leo. Interested in finding out, both globally and domestically, what the profile is of these 18 through 20-something-year-olds, education-wise, ethnicity. Talked a little bit about gender, but just where are these folks coming from? Are they from affluent families? Are they coming from impoverished areas? What does that look like?
Yeah. Definitely could. Well, I think because this is an international group that I'm specifically thinking of, it's naturally diverse, right? Because you're bringing, young people from around the world. I do think in a lot of ways, in a lot of senses, the young entrepreneurs who are building these businesses, a lot of the time they do come from sort of money, because they have that kind of financial cushion to do what they're doing. But I think some of the true success stories come from young people who don't have that safety net, who are literally putting everything on the line, and they are able to bootstrap and make it. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say because I was affiliated with a specific network that's sourcing specific types of entrepreneurs. I do think that a large portion of these young people are, coming from money to some degree. However, a lot of them that, really truly make it on their own accord are not, and they're just simply brilliant and willing to take the risk. So that's definitely something to look at. I know here in LA or in the Valley, it's white, male dominated for sure. I think more and more women are moving to the space, but for one reason or another, it's not a natural tendency for women. Like even my girlfriends, they don't want to go with me to Hungary, So it's just maybe a cultural thing. I'm still figuring it out, but definitely room for more, especially in venture capital. They're not racially diverse at all, and there are very few women. So we need to find a way to change that, definitely.
Last question. Back here.
Hi, my name's Graham. You made a comment earlier about sort of the number of women in sort of startups and that versus men, etc. One of the questions that sort of came to mind is, given that sort of structural, what seems to be almost a structural impediment and that seems to be talked about, are women being forced more into certain types of entrepreneurial activities that is more restrictive or more focused than men?
So I know that in the medical space, in STEM, specifically focused on medical, there are a lot of women leaders in the space. Also, in e-commerce, fashion, these kind of industries, there are a lot more women than men. I'm not sure if that's fully answering your question.
In other words, are women sort of basically more predominant in certain types of startups?
Yeah, definitely, totally. I mean, e-commerce, there are many women founders in e-commerce. In fact, when I was helping build this network of female founders, so many of the startups coming through were in the e-commerce space. But maybe, I don't know. Maybe a cultural thing, who knows? But, you know, that's what I've seen.
I'm going to give you a break. I actually have a question for Michele. I think the docuseries is a great idea to focus on female women entrepreneurs. And I think this will be one way that women can see role models of people that are going through that process of starting a business. And even though a group like this is mainly male, but there are those of us like myself, we do have daughters, and I would like to find out a little bit more about where, first of all, is the docuseries already out, and where can we, maybe tell us about some of the entrepreneurs that you're featuring.
Yeah, thank you for the question. By the way, I love men, and I work with them all the time. I have a son who's here in Polytechnic. He's a junior. And I don't know if he's, you know, we don't encourage him to go to college. He has to make his own decision. I think Danielle, by the way, her major was international relations. And I think without college, she wouldn't have been where she is, but she would have found a different way. So it's not a must. We have very diverse women in the series. The production company is called Kavana Entertainment. We can give you information so you can follow us as we go. We have Nancy Liu, who is a very well-known young entrepreneur. She has a company called InPlug. She's Chinese American. Actually, she was born in China. Her parents were scholars, but no money. And she supported herself through piano competition. She trained herself to be an amazing pianist. And that's how she got some money to travel and to do what she wanted to do and to start a company. So we're following her. We have Adriana Herrera, who is Mexican-American from San Diego, relocated to Venice. She also has an amazing startup, and her inspiration is her mother. And so I feel like I'm the mother of all these women who are out here trying. And we have Cooper Harris, who is an amazing coder and won every hackathon you can think of, was a TV actress, comes from the Midwest, always thought she was going to get married and cook and whatever. And one day she said, that's it, I don't want to do this. I have coding skills and I want to do something with my life. I mean, you know, they all struggle, not all of them, but most of them still struggle. They eat macaroni and cheese and go and run $1 million companies. You know, it's that kind of the life-work balance that I'm interested in. We also have a woman named Cassie Betts. She's a little older. She's a single mother, and she has a fashion startup. And she grew up in the hard inner city, and her way of giving back is going to one of the toughest schools in Inglewood and teaching kids social media and marketing. Now, they wouldn't do it if they would not be paid, so she's actually paying them to learn, but they are like her first employees that she's training, and eventually are working for her in this company called District 2. Basically, since these kids started working for her company, her social media interaction grew 30%. So she's giving back, but she's also getting back. And then we have Dani, who we're following, and she comes from a very strange family. A filmmaker. My husband is a director of photography, so there was one parent in the house, but rarely two, because we're always shooting something. So she grew up very independent, and she humbly neglected to say that she was a long-distance runner champion, and that, I think, gave her a lot of endurance to go through what she's going through every day and have the discipline to work and do what it takes to be a young entrepreneur. So please follow our series. And in terms of
just touching on some of the points, so we are we're very early stage in the shooting process. So we're really just gathering all the footage for the pilot. And once we kind of pass that threshold and develop the pilot and continue with the first episode, etc., we're shopping out to networks. So we have a strong connection to Netflix and a few other networks that we're looking at. But before we get to that point, we are looking for sponsors and supporters to allow us to get to that point, like angel capital, sort of. So it's really a bootstrap passion project, but going in an excellent direction, and should be on air somewhere in the timeline is in about a year or end of summer for a pilot. Yeah.
And we have great sponsors already. It's kind of a magnet space for sponsors. They want to be
Thank you so much for coming out and speaking with us today. Thank you. So before I let everybody go, 3 things. I wanted to thank Innovate Pasadena and the Pasadena Convention Center for allowing us to host our meetup here. If you haven't bought a cup of coffee, please support them over there at Starbucks. The second thing is, how many people are new to Innovate Pasadena? So this is one of the many program innovators. We meet every Friday, rain or shine, unless it's a holiday. If you visit innovatepasadena.org or there's a newsletter sign up, you can receive an email about all the different things going on. There's Tech Sparks, there's Women in Tech, there's hackathons, developer groups, UX groups, you name it. There are so many different programs. This is just one of them. And the very last thing is, Dani and Michele, we normally at the very end of this, we do a selfie. So can I ask you to, you and your mother to please stand here so we could take a picture with the group? And please somebody do some funny. So everyone
Are you blocking anyone?